Hello, so earlier I had a 1 hour lecture on critical reasoning, and then I had a seminar after that also on critical reasoning, and basically we're looking at the Socratic method, and I've done a lot of additional work on the Socratic method and trying to understand it, over the past few days in preparation, but we're essentially being told that we don't know anything, that we know nothing about the world, and I guess in some ways that's true, but it just makes me feel like, why am I even at university if I don't know anything? But then I guess it's because, we can obviously get knowledge through questioning, or at least that's what the Socratic method says, that we have to question our beliefs in order to distinguish our ignorance, or in order to outline our ignorance and realise all the things that we don't know, and in the hopes of realising that we don't know things, we can then pursue true knowledge because we desire truth. So we pursue true knowledge by questioning, like I just said, everything. And this generally happens within a dialogue, I guess Socrates would say. I don't know if it's always possible for us to question ourselves and our beliefs, and I think it probably is. We can probably go so far by questioning ourselves, but we also have to have conversations with other people, because other people also have a different worldview, and then they're questioning their worldview at the same time as them questioning your worldview, and maybe then you could teach each other something that you didn't previously know. But it's really interesting as well, because we have to look at the definitions of words and concepts. Because those are things that we use quite often. We use concepts in our daily life all the time, and we take the meaning for granted. So, for instance, when we talk about beauty or truth or knowledge itself or friendship, to take a bit more of a trivial example, or chair, we assume we know the definitions of these things. We assume we know the meaning of these things. Maybe we don't assume we know the definition, but we assume we know the meaning, and perhaps those two things aren't necessarily completely distinct. But then again, they sort of are, because I guess the definition is something which is articulable, something we can articulate, whereas meaning isn't always something that we can articulate. But then again, it depends how you define meaning, because the meaning of the word meaning also needs to be, questioned under the Socratic method. And whenever I use any sorts of words, I'm assuming a specific definition or meaning of those words, and it may not necessarily be the case that I can actually know the meaning, or that I do actually know the meaning yet, because I haven't fully questioned it, and I haven't taken the questioning to its logical conclusion. Maybe sometimes I might say, what does that even mean? And then I'll go, whoa, that's crazy, and then I'll stop thinking, and I'll be like, just leave it, because it's difficult, Sometimes it's really difficult pinning down the meaning of words, and I don't think we always can know the meaning of words, or do know the meaning of words, or maybe we can, but, oftentimes I think humans are lazy, or maybe I'm lazy and I'll just give up halfway when I'm trying to figure out the meaning of a word. But, yeah, it's quite difficult. So today we looked at friendship, and we also looked at a square as a bit more of an easy example, because you think, okay, well, a square is pretty easy to define. So first we said, well, a square has 4 sides. Alright, well, is there any other shapes that have 4 sides that aren't square? And of course there are. There's a rectangle. It could have 4 wiggly sides. A square's got to have 4 straight sides, okay? A rectangle could also have 4 straight sides, so then you've got to be even more specific and say it's got 4 right angles which have straight sides, and then basically we ended up arriving at the conclusion of what a square actually is. So I think there's sufficient and necessary conditions for something to be a square. And there's sufficient and necessary conditions for something being the way it is. And I'm not sure I'm actually going to be able to define what those actually are, because I don't know, but I guess I can try. I guess necessity is something that has to be present within the definition in order for something to be what it is. And sufficient, I'm not sure, but sufficiency Okay, I'm not going to go down that avenue because I don't know, so I won't talk about it too much. But yeah, so we looked at it in terms of a square, right? Fairly easy. We also looked at chairs, so we thought about trying to define a chair and realised it's actually extremely difficult to define what a chair is. I can't remember if I looked at that in the lecture or not. Might not have. I've drank a little bit of alcohol, so yeah. So we looked at a chair. We were like, well, what's a chair? Something you sit on. Okay, well, are there other things that you can sit on that aren't necessarily a chair? And that would be a false positive, because if the definition says it's something you sit on and it includes more than just a chair, then it's a false positive because it includes additional things such as benches and sofas and couches and stools, and all of these are things you can sit on, but you certainly wouldn't refer to a sofa as being a chair. And there's false negatives as well, so that's when it doesn't necessarily include enough information. So it doesn't refer to a chair, I think. I don't know. I think the false negative is much harder to describe. So then we have to specify the definition even further and say, well, a chair is something one person can sit on, right? So, but then it's like, okay, a chair is something designed to be sat on, but it's designed for one person to sit on. That's a little bit more information. Maybe it gets us slightly closer to a chair because it rules out a sofa, which multiple people can sit on. But then again, it also still includes a stool. Okay, and then we have to say that the chair also has a back, right? So then we're getting even closer to a chair, but then again, you know, there could be other things that also have backs, like benches, but then again, multiple people sit on benches. So we basically have to do all these things. And of course, those are quite trivial examples, however, they may not necessarily be trivial examples because they could have meaning in certain areas. For example, if we're programming AI, we're trying to teach artificial intelligence, about the nature of the world around us, then we need to have specific definitions of the things that exist, unless it was somehow possible to teach the AI to scan something and see it in the way that an eye sees it and represents that to the AI as being a chair, because if we can look at something in the world and say it's a chair, then is it possible for AI to look at something in the world and say it's a chair without being able to give a set definition of what a chair is? Because that's what humans can do, right? So that's interesting. Okay, so that's essentially the Socratic method. Socrates asking people, about these different concepts they use, but we have to look at more difficult concepts, such as friendship and beauty and truth, like I said at the beginning. And it turns out these are a lot more difficult to define, because how would you define beauty? You could say, I know I talked about this video the other day, but I'll try to talk about it again. How would you define beauty? Well, you might say it's something which is subjective. Okay, well, there's plenty of things that could be subjective that aren't necessarily beauty, so beauty may be subjective, but subjective isn't beauty, if that makes sense. So the meaning of the word has to be sufficient, the definition you give has to be sufficient so that you could replace the concept or the term within a sentence and the sentence wouldn't lose any meaning, and I think that's what it means by sufficiency, maybe. So for example, if I was to say the sunset is beautiful, I would have to remove the word beautiful and substitute the word beautiful for my definition, and it still have exactly the same meaning. And I guess you could say beauty is something with noetic connotations. Okay, that maybe would fit. It's something that is almost intelligible. I think noetic is actually a good way to put it, because does noetic mean it can't necessarily be put into words, if I remember correctly? And I guess you could say that that's what beauty is, but then are there other things that have noetic qualities that aren't necessarily beautiful? Possibly, and so obviously when you start to question, you realise that the meaning of words is extremely complex, and this is just what we have to do for this part of the module, and it's really friggin' interesting looking into it all. But then we might look at other things, and I don't want to actually stray away too far away from the subject, but yeah, there's just different ways of looking at the world, and I guess this aspect of philosophy assumes, I'm going to call it a Socratic philosophy, assumes that knowledge comes from finding definitions of concepts and words. And, this is what a lot of philosophers have done throughout history and even in today's society. For example, in our legal system, we have to have set definitions of words in order to be able to avoid ambiguity, in order to be able to avoid misunderstanding. And it's especially important, I guess, with legal documents and things like that. But yeah, oftentimes we just use words that we don't actually truly know what they mean. And the problem isn't not knowing what they mean, because a lot of the time, we don't know things, and that's okay. But I guess what Socrates would say is the problem is not knowing what they mean and assuming that we do know what they mean. That's the main problem. Yeah, and I guess I realised today that I don't know a lot about a lot of things. I don't know what else to say about that. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave it there anyway, so thank you for watching. I don't know how good the video was. I appreciate any feedback. I know I got some feedback on the last video I made, which I do admit wasn't a very good video. It wasn't very structured at all. I hadn't really thought through what I wanted to say, so yeah, I'll try and be better with that, because I do want to understand the things that I'm reading, perhaps to get closer to truth, but also because it's necessary for my degree, because I don't want to be in debt for nothing.